Kyle here from allmeatreviews.blogspot.com. Apologies, I wasn't able to continue the list yesterday, but I had some stuff come up, and of course, life happens and things happen. So, continue on to the next part of the list, however many I can do today, Wednesday, December 7th, 2022. Favorite modern progressive art rock albums. I left off on 133, so here's 132. Imogen Heap's third and most recent proper studio album, Sparks. I really like this album. I know this came out the same day as another album that's going to be on this list pretty soon, the Kimbra album. But this album, I mean, I'm an Imogen Heap fan. I did a video on her in 2021. And I find this album maybe her most experimental, but it's kind of where she's gone. I mean, she's went from sort of pop rock songwriter to very layered, kind of artsy, proggy pop songwriter to now still artsy but more experimental. Oops. And this album, I mean, it doesn't have any like sort of super earworms. It's got a really ethereal and textured quality to it that I don't get bored with it. It's interesting. I have the vinyl pulled up. When I was making this list, of course, it pulls up sometimes other versions. But I mean, the listening chair. And talking about like that use of like those gloves she used to manipulate sound, kind of like a theremin. Cycle Song, Lifeline, Me the Machine. I mean, it's not like her previous record, which I love, which again will be covered later on the list. But I felt the previous record, not the previous record, Ellipsis, but the previous, Speak for Yourself, rather. I thought that what she was trying to do in some ways on Ellipse worked much better on this record. I know it was many years in the making because, again, say third proper. Yeah, she only has three. Well, she has four, actually, and I misspoke. She has her debut album, My Megaphone, then Speak for Herself, then Ellipse, then this. But the last album she released was 8 years ago. She just put out something literally last Friday, but it was a collaboration. It's like environmental music for a podcast with this guy named Dan O'Neill. Anyway, Sparks from 2014 from Imogen Heap, number 132, if I didn't go too far. There we go. Oops, I went a little too far. Number 131, the debut album from 22. I can't remember where they're from, Norway or Amsterdam. I mean, a lot of this they're from Norway. So, yeah, this was also sort of a long time coming debut album. Very kind of riffy, bass-driven at times, almost math rock, poppy math rock of sorts. It has a ton of earworms on it, from Plastic to Got to Do or Go To to Neil Estate with a K. Very much a play on words, some of their song titles and everything like that, but it's very energetic. My only issue with it is I know that the cymbals clip at some points on it, but oh man, I felt like this band could have been a lot bigger than they became. And this is my favorite record from them. They have a couple of records I enjoy, but unfortunately they might be no more at this point. But this record for a debut album is really impressive. Big among people that like the Deer Hunter and the Mars Volta. Some of the members are in a band called Marathon, which I like, but not as much as 22. Anyway, the debut album Flux from 22 from 2010, number 131. Number 130, another debut album, the debut album from local natives, Gorilla Manor, after they changed their name from Cobble at Rest. I love this band, and I still consider this their best record. From Sun Hands, which is really progressive, to World News, which is catchy and energetic. Camera Talk, Cards and Corners, Warning Sign, which is a cover of a Talking Head song. The groove on that one, the bass line is great. Sticky Thread, Wide Eyes, Airplanes. I mean, this is just filled with great songs. Great, energetic, layered, sometimes gang vocal songs. And while I love all their albums, I'm a fan of all their albums at least. I enjoy all their albums. This came out November 2009, as you can see, as it shows right there, rather. Kind of got known in 2010, though, in fairness. But knowing that I knew them as Cobble at Rest, this was a big deal when it came out. I was on board right away. They put out an EP a few months before that, but then, of course, they had the EPs with Cobble at Rest. But most people think of this album for 2010. Anyway, Gorilla Manor, which is the name of the house they were like living in, I guess. They called it that, maybe, in Southern California. Anyway, number 130. Number 129, Blind as Night, the second album from, again, I want to say another Norwegian band. They're all from Norway. There's a ton of bands I love from Norway. Team Me. This, while I love another one of the records, which I'm going to talk, I love all three of their records, actually. This might have their best song to me in F is for Faker. The sort of the gang vocals, the energy, the emotion, the passion, the sort of the layered. They're a lot like Mew, but they're kind of doing Mew in a different way than Mew does, which is kind of a weird way to put it, Blind as Night. I don't know. They're kind of a pretty consistent band. Some days I might say this is my favorite song, riding my bicycle. I bought this on vinyl and everything like that. The title track. It's a very texture. I remember this album was a little darker in tone than their first album. That was what the difference was. But anyway, 129, Blind as Night from Team Me from 2014. In 2012, Ramona Falls' second album, Prophet, which, like Team Me, Ramona Falls being Brent Knopf, who had at this point then split and left Menomina, but Brent Knopf of Menomina, solo project, very piano driven at times, but the song Spore is just a total banger. Excuse me. The song Spore it's epic. It's really good. Really good. Probably among the top 5 songs that Brent ever wrote, for sure. The rest of the record, though, I like a lot of, although Spore is kind of the crowning jewel of it. From Bodies of Water, Archimedes Plutonium, Fingerhold. It's similar to the previous record, the debut album, but in some ways it's sort of like, oh my god, someone compared it to Vampire Weekend there. Yeah, I know. I remember this. When I heard Spore, I was just totally in love with this, and I thought this would potentially be my album of the year that year. But anyway, so number 128, Prophet by Ramona Falls from 2012. So moving on to the next portion, another connected Brent Knopf album, Friend and Foe from Menomina, which came out in 2007. The second proper full-length album. They have an instrumental album that came out between this and the debut album, but this has Wet and Rusting, the biggest sort of well-known song, and it's a terrific song, Wet and Rusting. Catchy. I've never gotten sick of it. The piano part is just amazing on it. But over time, I've come to appreciate this album. Initially, when I got into Menomina, that was really the go-to on this album. There were a couple others I would listen to, but as I came to learn, songs like Muscle and Flow, The Pelican, Running, it's the division between the three members. I talked about my Menomina video back in 2021. We got, Brent, Danny, and Justin, the three, and it's still democratic, but each song whose is whose. Wet and Rusting is a Brent song. But yeah, this is, it's not my favorite Menomina album. I'm spoiling a little bit, but in some ways, it's like their most polished album. The production is definitely a step up, and I don't know if they ever made a record. Of course, the artwork, I don't really emphasize artwork that much, but you look at the artwork. The artwork is a pretty massive part. In fact, I believe they got a Grammy. They nominated, I think they won a Grammy for the artwork. It's sort of like Led Zeppelin 3, where there's images underneath those sort of translucent little gaps in the artwork. But anyway, Menomina's Friend and Foe from 2007, number 127. Number 126, Sufjan Stevens, The Age of Odds. Spoiler, this is my favorite Sufjan Stevens album. There are some other records I enjoy from him, like Illinois. But this has Impossible Soul, which is Sufjan doing a big electronic prog rock song, and it's the biggest reason. It's a perfect epic in a lot of ways. The crescendo, the kind of repeated choruses, and the energy, the build on that song is just great. The use of horns. But the rest of this album is still pretty damn good. In fact, looking at this, it's strange because I only think of it just for Impossible Soul, and then the rest of I don't think of it having 10 other songs actually. I'm not sure if I'm looking at the because there might have been more than one version. And the other thing about it, and I'm just not remembering, is I know he put out that EP that was like an hour long, which is an EP is not supposed to be an hour long, but my memory of this was that okay, because Vesuvius was one of the go-tos on this, the title track Vesuvius, but the guy had a ton of music. He always has had a ton of music that just sort of he needed to find a way to put it on here and put the Age of Odds. The Age of Odds though is different because it is so electronic and glitchy, and he used more electronics on this album than some of the previous albums, and even some of the albums that have come since. Although some of the albums that have come since I haven't. I'm not talking about Carrie and Lowell, but some of the other ones I haven't spent as much time with. But to me, this is his masterpiece, Sufjan. So yeah, and I like a lot of the other songs on here, but it's largely for the Impossible Soul epic. Sort of the idea that a massive epic that's really good, that just totally works, makes an album that much better itself. Number 126, Sufjan Stevens and the Age of Odds. Number 125 from 2010. Number 125, Armistice from Mute Math, the second album, from 2009. I went on praising this album a fair amount on my Mute Math video from last year. I think it was last year or earlier this year. I can't remember now. This is a pretty consistent record. I think I kind of, myself and many fans have overlooked it at times because of the albums that came between it. But The Nerves, Pins and Needles, Goodbye is just a banger. That's always pretty much still is my favorite song. The title track, Spotlight, which was ended up being on the Twilight soundtrack and everything like that. But yeah, and Clipping. I remember. I think this album still deserves more play. I think it's a little underrated still, given that it's lower than some of their other records. But yeah, Armistice from 2009 from Mute Math, number 125. Number 124, Jazz Kamikaze album Supersonic Revolution. The first sort of proper album they did with a vocalist and their approach to sort of doing proggy pop. March 8th, 2010 it came out. 2010 was an incredible year for me. A lot of my favorite stuff came out that year. A year that just loaded. I have a bunch of favorites. Bring Back Spring. Initially, Music Is My Heroine. That's super catchy. I love the riff on that song. The Way She Drives Me. The ending epic, Acropolis. Although, people say this is like Mew doing jazz. I can get that to a point. It's a little bit like The Reign of Kindo in some ways too. Acropolis reminds me a fair amount of comforting sounds, but anyway, yeah. They've only done really one other proper record with sort of pop-esque vocals, which I think. Well, I like their jazz albums, even though the name is the Jazz Kamikaze, and they're from, I believe, Denmark, like Mew. Yep. I think that they succeed the best when they do that pop rather than the jazz style of songwriting. This is a terrific record. I can play the whole thing, and it's very energetic, a very consistent album. Anyway, Jazz Kamikaze, the Danish band, Supersonic Revolutions from 2010, number 124. Number 123 from 2007, The Receiving End of Sirens, second album and final album, or last album. The Earth Sings Me Fa Me. Of course, this does not include the services of Casey Crescenzo, who is now a full-time doing the Deer Hunter stuff at this point. But it still didn't really deter that much from it because it's still a really good record. The production, I have a few issues with. Some of the cymbals clip a little bit, but it's very textured, very almost space rocky at times, ambient, and there's really nice like guitar textures, like very cool, riffy, punchy guitar, layered, trippy guitar textures. From Smoke and Mirrors to Saturnus to Stay Small. Stay Small is rather catchy. Wander, Swallow People Whole. It's a dreamy record at times too. It's a contrast to their debut album, which is amazing, but in a good way. Alex Bars and Brendan Brown, especially among the other members of the band, really showed that while they loved having the services of Casey Crescenzo, they didn't necessarily need it to write really good songs still. The sad thing is this was their final work, and the members now are just doing day jobs. I don't know if they're doing music. I love this band. They're Seated in Sirens. Are they punk? Well, not real. And this is less punk or post-hardcore. They're definitely sort of textured, a lot of using different dynamics and time signatures, so it's, a type of art rock, that has its styles of prog and punk or post-hardcore, I guess you could say. But there's less of it on this album as there is on the debut album. But anyway, from 2007, The Earth sings Mi Fa Mi. Of course, Mi Fa Mi. I always think of the Sound of Music, Do Re Mi. Anyway, the whole singing up and down the scale. Move on to the next list. Number 122, Muse, Black Holes and Revelations. I kind of see this album as the last sort of album I really enjoyed from Muse, although, like most of the albums I even enjoy, they're kind of top-heavy in some ways. This album is probably best known for a couple of really, not overplayed songs, but songs that have sort of made their trademark with Muse. One being Starlight, which I still like. It's a nice pop song. It's, got a nice anthem or, theme to it. But the other one is Knights of Sidonia. Knights of Sidonia is really epic. It's in many senses of the word, very galloping, But it also this album has a bunch of other songs. City of Delusion and Map of the Problematique or Matic. Those are like my other go-tos. It's got Invincible. Take a Bow is sort of a crowd favorite. They play live. Massive Black Hole. They also got pretty well known for that song. Sounds a little bit like Prince or even Timberlake at times. But it actually is a song that's grown on me over the years. When it first came out, I was kind of one that I wanted to skip it, but I don't hate it. So yeah, I mean, this is not a perfect record, but its best songs are so damn good. It's hard not to have it on this list and have it where it fell. I mean, there are some albums I'd probably put that are below it that I maybe like in some ways beginning to end more or more consistent, but the best tracks are so good, it makes this record really good. So anyway, I mean, Starlight is a song I've maybe grown a little bit sick of because it's just always played, but I don't hate it. Anyway, number 122, Muse's Black Holes and Revelations. Number 121, the primary record. I like a few of the other King Gizzard and the Lizard records that I've heard, but this is the one that I think of their most progressive rock-like. Of course, that Crumbling Castles tune is very King Crimson-like. This album came out in 2017. Yeah, I mean, that's the best thing I can elaborate on this. I remember the thing flowed well, and it didn't have some of the production issues I've had with some of their other records. They're doing prog, really psychedelic. They're almost everything they do is psychedelic rock, but this is their most proggy, and there's a King Crimson element that's I don't notice on as many of the other albums I've heard, which are only like 5 or 6 records. They have like 23 or whatever. So anyway, Polygon Wonderland, it has nothing to do with Janelle Monáe, by King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard at number 121 from 2017. Number 120, Amanda Palmer and the Grand Theft Orchestra, basically her follow-up to, in a lot of ways, to Who Killed Amanda Palmer, the album from 2012, Theater is Evil. I think she topped her last record, and I really loved her last record. I like her music, solo music, more as a whole, generally, just with this record and that record, than any of the Dresden Dolls stuff. Well, I liked the Dresden Dolls some, but piano kind of art punk. This album is just, I mean, I know she got known for this massive Kickstarter campaign for it, to write videos and stuff. It was huge. It just showed how much of a cult following she really has. How big of one she has. It kind of launched Kickstarter, like the biggest musician to ever do a campaign, or the biggest campaign ever on Kickstarter. But this is just filled with songs I love, from Massachusetts Avenue to Want It Back. Want It Back is a total pop banger. Let's see here, what was it? There's a couple others. Melody Dean, Ollie Ollie Oxenfree, I Lost My Wallet, I believe, is on here, but Do It With a Rock Star is another one. Where is. I'm looking at the track list. So I know she has a song called I Lost My Wallet. And I'm either not seen it. Killing Type. The Killing Type is another. She did a video for that. It's kind of dark. Well, maybe there's more than one version. Because I'm almost certain there's a song called I Lost My Wallet. Anyway, this is the production is really pristine on this album. I mean that song she did with the ukulele. I wish she would have been included on this, but yeah, this is a terrific album, and I don't know if she'll ever do anything as good. To be honest, I love her, but it just she was hitting all cylinders on that album, Theater as Evil, from number 120 from 2012 from Amanda Palmer and the Grand Theft Orchestra. Number 119, Pure Reason Revolution's Amor Vincent Omnia, the second album, the follow-up to The Dark Third, which was a hard album to follow up. This came out in 2009. It's got songs like, the title track, Victoria's Cupid. Well, I have to stop. All right, so I was going on about Amor Vincent Omnia before I was interrupted. Yeah, this has a lot of great songs. It's different in a lot of ways. It's more electronic than the Dark Third, of course. A lot of people that know Pure Reason Revolution history, but I think it worked in a lot of ways. Victoria's Cupid and Deo Ex Machina. Those are the two. Deo Ex Machina always sounds like a Nine Inch Nails, very Nine Inch Nails inspired track. And it's pretty heavy. The Gloaming, the title track. The title track is with repeated vocals. Amor, Vincent Omnia, Amor. It's about love. And some other things. Yeah, I mean Disconnect and Bloodless too. The opening track. It's 5 minutes. Very textured. I haven't listened to this album in a long time. The truth, I listened to some of the individual tracks, but I remember thinking it was in the Dark Third, but in some ways it was good that it wasn't the Dark Third, and I felt like it kind of worked over time. It worked better than I expected. Even a lot of people weren't as kind to this record, but I think it's underrated. I'd like to get it on vinyl, but I don't think it's been issued on vinyl. No, it hasn't. But the fact that some of their other records haven't, maybe it eventually will. So that's number 119 from Pure Reason Revolution. Number 118, the final album on this list. I think this is the second album, yes, by Murder by Death. So I've said it a number of times. I've never done a video on Murder by Death, but Murder by Death is a band, a post sort of Americana, alt-western, post-rock band, who I only really enjoy the first two albums, and I enjoy the Finch EP, which is like a soundtrack to something. That's it, really. So this is the second album they did. The biggest reason I'd say that, I could explain that, is because the singer started sounding like Johnny Cash, and they stopped doing a lot of the progressive or post-rock elements. There's still some of it on the previous records, but I don't need a singer that sounds like Johnny Cash. I'll listen to Johnny Cash then. So anyway, but on this album, he's singing just sort of normal. He's a little higher range. He sounded a little younger. The lead singer from Murder by Death, who I should know, his name is like Adam Turla. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, this record, and like the previous record, the debut album, is like a suite in some ways. The intermission, the interludes they have, a lot of the songs flow into each other really well. And I mean, I know at one point I hadn't listened to this album, and I revisited it a few years ago again, and I'm like, no, there's something really charming about this record, and both this and the first record. Although I am guilty in that I distinguishing the two records between each other, I'm not that great at it. They sound very much a continuation. This sounds like a continuation of their debut album, which looked like this was Conrad Friedrich Williams. That's not the album I'm talking about, but that will show up soon on this list. I mean, to start to name highlights, The Devil in Mexico. It's an interesting title for an album too. But, the reason why I was introduced to Murder by Death is when the band Kiss Kiss, who also shows up on this list, they were compared to them a little bit in that you used violin and some other chamber instrumentation with, you know, post rock, and that was kind of my selling point. Plus, they use vocals. A lot of post rock doesn't have any vocals, so. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think this and the debut album are they're not universally praised, but barely anyone, like almost anyone who listens to them likes them. Gothic country is one description. But yeah, it's got the chamber instrument. I think there's some horns on this, if I'm not mistaken. But yeah, I mean, why is it this high compared to some of the other records? I don't know. It's one of those records where frequently I kind of assumed it would kind of wear out its welcome with me, and I just wouldn't think that much of it, and it always came back, and I enjoyed it. So, Murder by Death, it's a sophomore album from them, 2003. Who Will Survive and What Will Be Left of Them? All right, I'm going to do one more, and hopefully I can do a little combining of videos. Unfortunately, my time got usurped a little bit by that phone call. So, number 117, an album that I haven't listened to in a while either, but it's the debut album from Michigan's own chamber rock band, Anathallo. Luminescence in the Atlas position. Now, I'll say this about this. They use like trombone and some trumpet on this, but this is maybe their heaviest album, even though it's not very long, as you can see. It's only 7 songs. It's really like an EP, but it's considered a full length. And they don't use as much of the chamber stuff as they didn't emphasize it. And the dynamics aren't maybe as noticeable as some of their later albums. But that being said, and there's always been almost like a Tool element to this. There's a couple songs. The song But Without Love is one of my favorite tracks they ever did. It may be my favorite track they ever did, actually. It's one of. To Renew, to Cause to Grow or Bloom Again. The title track, in effect, in the Atlas position. Or the title track of those two, the kind of a hybrid. But I don't have a copy of this, but I have this with the Anthology compilation, but I would love to get a copy of it. For the longest time, I would always kind of lean on this record being sort of my go-to favorite Anathallo album. Yeah, I posted the little facepalm, I don't know how many years ago that was. But yeah, I mean, they did some things I enjoyed after this, and then the artwork is just blah. There's not a lot to it. I don't know what it's supposed to represent. Maybe the title, that's what the title's supposed, Luminous. I don't. But anyway, that being said, and it's sort of less is more in a lot of ways. But and I'm not a Tool fan, but if like you like Tool and you want to hear Tool influenced rock music with some chamber like instrumentation, like horns, this would be one to check out. Anathallo's debut album, Luminescence in the Atlas position from 2001. Number 116, another debut album, To the Treetops from Team Me. I just talked about Blind as Night. This one came out in 2011, and it's splitting hairs between the two records. That other album has more kinds of textures to it, but this album might flow a little better even. It's got a couple just massive earworms. Was it Weather Vanes and Chemicals, Dear Sister, and the Riding My Bicycle? Those three. I mean, this whole thing, there's an obvious, very strong, almost blatant Mew influence, but I find that the songwriting is so good it doesn't matter. The track number 9 is a mouthful, but so some of it, I'm not going to use the word pretentious, but it's a little egotistical when they were, having some of these track titles that long. It's not like other bands haven't done that, but I find that a lot of people that like Team Me lean toward this as their favorite, although it's like they're just a consistent band. They put out 3 records and they're all really good. So yeah, To the Treetops, the debut album from Norway's Team Me from 2011 at number 116. Number 115, another debut, because I'm really into debut albums from this decade to this last decade. They just finished a couple years ago. So Be It from Gather, a band that's from New Zealand, I believe, and I was referred to them by seeing Kimbra posting about them. Yep. If they're not metal, the members used to be in a band called This City Sunrise, which also is really good, a little heavier, a little more punk influence, but actually it's classified as metal. Interesting. Some of my friends didn't like that. A lot of people didn't get this. A little bit like Galactic Cowboys, where you either got them or didn't get them, and I totally got them. I found that So Be It, the album, the Regular Frontier, and Thrive were my favorite sort of. The dynamics really work. um, the vocalist kind of got more used to his voice. You compare to the stuff from the City Sunrise. Um, I listened to this more and more, and the more I loved it. Mister, I mean, some of it's very odd. It's you could say it's sort of avant garde, but it doesn't go too far off the deep end. And they use a lot of rhythms and odd time signatures. It's just like, and they don't sound like anyone else either. Really, I can't. I Am Mother Earth a little bit. There's a couple bands I think of a little bit with them, but as a whole, there really isn't a band that really sounds like them, which is really unique. I mean, gospel maybe slightly, but they're not trippy like gospel. Anyway, this album is my favorite record from Gather. Unfortunately, there are no more, but I love this record. This was finished in my top 10 records for a reason from 2012. Anyway, so be it from Gather from 2012, number 115. Number 114, Twilight Cinema from Major Parkinson. I love Major Parkinson's whole catalog. Black Box, I think, was on, and I mean, pretty much I haven't heard their first album, in fairness, but this is the album that got me into them. It's got the song The Wheelbarrow, which is maybe their most prog rock. It's got great dynamics, and the arrangement is just really clever. A Cabin in the Sky, Heart Machine, Black River. Impermanence, of course, is the one that maybe the singer John sounds the most like Liam Neeson, although he frequently always does. But yeah, this is a terrific record. It's sort of cabaret and theatrical. I kind of find like sometimes on some of their songs they kind of go on longer, but this album than they needed to. This album doesn't seem to do that much. The Wheelbarrow is the only really long epic track, even though it is prog. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an acquired taste at points, a little bit like Gatherer too, actually. But so this album came out in 2014. The Twin Cinema or Twilight Cinema, not Twin Cinema. I'm not talking about the new pornographers. Twilight Cinema from Major Parkinson, number 114. All right, so Ornament and Crime from Self at number 113. Their album that was recorded at the turn of the century, but actually didn't get released officially until 2017. There was Grime. What is it? Something in Grime, which was like an archive release that came out as an alternative. If I can look it up real quickly here. No, it's not. Not Ornament. Well, this was considered archive. Anyway, there were other songs that didn't make this album. Porno Mint and Crime, I'm thinking of. But I revisited this the other day after, I did that Self video and went on Self Marathon back in 2021. There's just a lot of really memorable, catchy, layered songs on this album, and the production is a step up. Now, a lot of it is maybe a little more guitar-driven than some of the stuff he's done since the recording of this album. Keep in mind, it came out in 2017, but it was recorded around the turn of the century, like not that long after Gizmodury. But I want to say, okay, so Pathetic Song is one of my go-tos. Not Out with the Bang. One of the songs is like a jellyfish. I'm thinking it was Pounding Truth. That song is amazing. But How Can You Make Me Happy? How Can I Make You Happy? LA Radio, of course, is that little, sort of parody of radio. And, the guy asked to play himself and, self-recorded basically everything, I believe, on it. Yeah, this is a terrific record. That one that, in truth, I'm still sort of needing to revisit because there's so many self records and some are needing more than others. And like I said, Porno Mint and Crime is still part of the story of this record because the song, there are 12 songs on here that the label wanted, but he wanted to release other songs, so the Porno Mint and Crime stuff was from the same writing and recording sessions. But anyway, that's number 113. I'm going to try doing one more list and then call this a day, and then I'm going to have to resume hopefully tomorrow without interruptions, hopefully, too. So, okay, House of Fools, number 112, versus The Beast from 2011, or 2011, it really came out in, like, early 2012. This has Need to Be Free, which in some ways is my favorite House of Fools song. It's the last full-length album that they released. The Need to Be Free demo I love even more, though, but I still love that song. That song hits home so much. The passion and emotion, sort of, fighting, the frustration is all over that song. Time, Oblivion, Dogfight, Johnny Utah, When the Lights Go Out. The Lights Go Out sort of like a closing piece where they have samples and like phone voicemails and stuff like that, and their frustrations with their record label and sort of the industry. But um, while their other record is going to show up on this at some point, this is an album I still love. I bought like 3 copies of it or whatever, and I love House of Fools. You know, it pains me that they're not around right now, although there was some talk that they might have get back together and record a new album if it hadn't been for COVID. That maybe they still could happen. But anyway, Versus the Beast from 2011, early 2012, the last album from House of Fools from number 112. So I was just talking about Self and Gizmogery. I was talking about Ornament and Crime. I've talked about it, Gizmogery, number 111 from Self from the year 2000. This has maybe the most well-known Self songs in Trunk Fell Amps. This cover of What a Fool Believe, and then Fool Believes, you know, the Dewey Brothers, Michael McDonald. The other one is Ordinaire. It's maybe not as well known as those other 2 songs, but yeah, I mean, Chameleon. This is the children instrument charm on this record. I mean, is it as deep as some of their other records and as deep as some of the records that maybe are even below it on this list? Maybe not, but it's a classic. And it's the first album that I got into from them. In some ways, it's still the album the most iconic and one I'd recommend to people that've never heard Self before. It's a unique experiment of the children's instrument thing. You know, and so it always will be nostalgic, and it's part of this style of hybrid art rock, prog, power pop, whatever you want to call it. And the guy is just amazing, and this is just one of many amazing albums he's released. So, number 111, Gizmogery from Self in the year 2000. Number 110, the second Never Ending White Lights album, the second Never Ending White Lights album on this list. Act 2, The Blood and Life Eternal. Really, the first one I heard, it came out in 2007. This, of course, again has the services of Jimmy Necco that Daniel Victor wrote for on the song Dove Colored Sky, which, well, I love Our Final Hymn. I go back and forth which one I like more. Dove Colored Sky is a more like sort of song I would listen to more regularly, although it's still really dreamy and melancholy. This also has a few other go-tos. The song The Warning, which I've always thought of like a Pink Floyd, David Gilmour element to that. And there's one other one on this that the Living's one I've always enjoyed. The sort of crescendo and the dynamics on that track are another one that I look to and think of this album for. I want to say Always. I think it's Always. Yeah, that one's pretty epic itself. But you know, and the Never Ending White Lights, you know, he writes great songs, but he also sort of writes these songs that go well. He manages to fit them on the album and sort of in the concept of the album. It fits, and so they're kind of, you know, greater than some of their parts in a lot of ways. I can't remember the other guests off the top of my head. I don't have my copy, of course, in front of me, but you know, I mean, it's Daniel Victor and it's Never Ending White Lights, and you know, I enjoy even the songs that are more like ethereal and you know, meditative in some ways. Although, you know, he would, after this, do the Act 3, which would be a little bit of a departure of that style in that it was more energetic and rock-like. But yeah, this is a dreamy, melancholy album that's very much a go-to if you're needing some therapy music. And I totally appreciate it. Things like Pink Floyd and Peter Gabriel, you can hear it definitely on moments on this album. So, all right, number 110, Never Ending White Lights, Act 2, The Blood and the Life Eternal. So number 109 and number 108 are sort of a hybrid. It's Margot and the Nuclear So-and-So's. To me, that incarnation's final works. It was a combination. They wanted to release the album called Animal, and there's some songs that the label didn't like, they wanted, and the label wanted other album songs, so some of them came out on Animal, some of them come out on Non-Animal, and some of them are on both. A little bit like Leaving Your Body Map and from Model in the Well and Bath. I kind of lean a little bit toward Non-Animal if I'm choosing between the two, because it has, I believe it is, Pages Written on a Wall. That one's a proggy track. Very good dynamics and time changes in it. Let's see here. There's a couple others that weren't included on Animal that Animal had instead. But I mean, Broad Ripple is Burning, German Motor Car, As Tall as Cliffs is I always thought that the album should open with that. These are all on Non-Animal though. Now Margot and Luke and So-and-So's I've talked about before, but never did a video on them. They're still around technically, I think, but the membership has changed dramatically. Yeah, I mean, this Animal, the proper Animal, has some songs that aren't. It's a different order. Children's Crusade on Acid was on not Animal, but it's the opening track. As Tall as Cliffs is the ending track, so they did something with the track list. I remember a lot of the tracks that weren't on non Animal, they were on this, were like the ballads, and not all of them, but Cold Kind and Lemon Eyes is another one I remember enjoying on this. You know, my was it my Hello Vagina? Yeah, about someone, childbirth and everything like that. But yeah, this is I mean, it's I kind of the one's not clearly that much better than the other. I think together you would have, if you made if it was a double album, or at least if you took, I could cherry pick, you'd have an album that would have probably finished in the almost in the top 50. I was obsessed with this band for a short while of time. Around the time of Anathello, the chamber rock, great dynamics. They use like synthesizers, like dreamy synths and everything like that. And I know like a few of the people, Andy, who's not in the band, one of the many members who left the band. Andy Fry is a Marillion fan, and his brother Chris. But they have Dust of Retreat, which I can't remember if I've already mentioned it yet, but that also, maybe it's on the honorable mentions, as a record I really enjoy. But yeah, Margot Luke and So-and-So's Animal and Not Animal, but one of them came out in vinyl, the other came on CD from 2008. So I'm going to stop for now, because I got to kind of look at the time and everything like that. But please subscribe if you haven't subscribed. Hopefully tomorrow I can resume this starting at 107 and get a proper. I may have to do this in two parts. Get a proper get a proper 25 in so I can continue to move on and try to complete this list. But thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.